Hey folks, this is BestInSlot. Welcome to part 8, I think, of 747 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 Theories, Speculation and Analysis series. This is indeed a Jurassic World Evolution 1 thumbnail. I quite liked it when I made it, so I used it again. But I made him fancy, so you wouldn't think I'm lazy. He's fancy. Okay. Today we're going to take a look at something important that Rich Newbold talked about in his interview the other day. The headline feature was absolutely the pack hunting, and we kind of talked about and predominantly reacted to the pack hunting in the video the other day. If you want to see the entire interview, it is up on the channel. But there was something else he talked about which is very, very important as well, and which I'd like to take a slightly deeper speculative look at, basically. So I'm going to play that clip of the interview now, and then we'll move on.
The Mosasaur is such an iconic dinosaur in Jurassic World, and it's been really great to bring that to life as well. And it's going to have all the behaviours and detail that the land dinosaurs have as well. So it's great to have kind of that as a challenge for our players as well in the game.
So what he said was, the Mosasaur, it's such an iconic dinosaur in Jurassic World. Leave it alone. And it's been really great to bring that to life as well. And it's going to have all the behaviours and detail that the land dinosaurs have as well. So it's great to have that as a challenge for our players as well. Rich says as well quite a lot. It's a great interview. I do recommend go checking out the whole thing, preferably without me prattling on over the top. But there's really two things he said I want to focus on here. The first is, of course, it's going to have all the behaviours and detail. So I think detail, yeah, that they're going to be well made, they're going to be beautifully animated, all that kind of rubbish, who cares about that? But behaviours is really interesting to me. And actually, this as well at the bottom, that as a challenge for a challenge, let's just highlight challenge there. The word challenge is actually really interesting here. So when I first heard about aquatics and aviaries in Evolution 2, which was about a week ago, time has flown, it's crazy. I assumed they would be like in Evolution 1, like, you know, like the aviary where it's like the static. This is rocks, by the way. There you go. That's my aviary from Evolution 1. I thought there'd be a static building, maybe with more complex loops, maybe even with individual AI, no looping at all, but I thought they would be static buildings. Since then, we're pretty sure that the aviaries at least are custom made. Maybe not overly custom made, but there's at least some form of player control in how they're designed. And I have to imagine the same will count for the aquariums, we'll call them, as well. But the behaviours aspect is very interesting. We're going to dive into that, but challenge is actually even more important when you link it with this, because the aviaries in Evolution 1, there was no challenge involved. You plop them down, you fill it with Pteranodons, and then you didn't have to do anything. They broke out only if there's like a tornado, you didn't have to feed them, you didn't have to maintain them, you didn't have to worry about hunting or intraspecies domination or anything like that. All the challenge that you would associate with a regular Jurassic World Evolution dinosaur habitat simply wasn't there with the aviaries. Even if they did break out, they didn't eat anyone, right? So the suggestion that not only the aviaries, but the Mosasaurus, but the aquatic creatures in Evolution 2 will also have a challenge suggests more complex behaviours. It really does double down on that idea that we'll have to at least feed them. We'll have to maybe worry about hunting and intraspecies domination, and breakouts are slightly different, I would say, with the aquatic species. If a Mosasaurus breaks out, what does it do? Except just plop onto the ground like a beach whale. But, you know, there could be an element of aquatic to human interaction in several different ways. Okay, I'm recording this little bit post-video, just sort of slipping it in there. I've ended up talking for nearly 25 minutes. I had a lot to say and a lot of ideas about how these systems could work. I just want to temper expectations a little bit, throw some grains of salt in there. Even if this text here comes from an official Frontier dev in an official interview, it should still be taken with a grain of salt, and that's not a slight on Frontier or on Evolution 2, but that's true of all video games and all media content and everything on the planet, basically. Until we see these systems in action and we get a proper handle on how complex they are, you know, we shouldn't assume the best is going to happen. We can aim for like the middle ground. I think it's a little bit. You can be optimistic, but then don't be so optimistic that you're crushed if your dreams don't come to be reality. Does that make sense? I just wanted to throw some preemptive water on there. I'm very, very excited about this idea. I don't want to get ahead of myself, and I'm also getting ahead of myself in the video. So let's look at Diggy Diggy, which is what this is called. I think very briefly I want to talk about how aquariums are likely to work in Evolution 2, and I've got several ideas on this, basically. So the first is it'll be like the aviary. Now, some people have suggested this will be a spline-like system. If you've ever used the pen tool here in Photoshop, you'll know what that looks like. It's basically you place a node, and then you've got like a line that you can sort of roughly control and bend, and you can place another node, and you can place another node, and you have these bendy lines. And what you do is place all these nodes, place all these lines, and then it would plop an aquarium or an aviary down in that shape over the top. I think this is a nice idea, but I think it might be pushing the boat out a little bit too much for Evolution. My first thought with Evolution's the aviaries, based on the screenshots we'd seen, is that you'd have your base nodule, because you need a base nodule because it needs the entrance, for example. It also needs probably the hatchery, stuff like that. And then you just maybe place another one over here, another one over here, and it would kind of connect them together based on how many you have and in what direction, and stuff like that. It could be halfway between the two, it could be much more complex than I'm expecting. I'm trying to not get too far ahead of myself because I know I've done that in the past. So the other option is that, unlike what we think is custom aviaries, they'd be like the aviaries in Evolution 1, they'd be static buildings that you place down, and there is precedence for this in Jurassic World. Of course, we had the Mosasaurus Lagoon, there it is, looking moist, it looks like an angry man, and you'd have the seats around the side, and you just place down the Mosasaurus Lagoon. But instead of being restricted to Mosasaurus, you could also have other aquatic reptiles in there. And like I say, I thought this is what they were going to do. This is the easy out. This is the easy option. And yeah, you could still make this pretty cool. You could have two different viewing modes. You'd have an above ground one where you're looking out into the water, like they do at the start, and then you'd have the underwater one as well, which I'm super excited about. But you know when they go down in Jurassic World, the first film, and the underground, and the Mosasaurus swims past and chows down on the shark, and everyone's like, wow! That kind of thing is very, very exciting to me. Because it's dark and has pretty lights, and that's what I like. So you'd be viewing like this, completely under the ground and looking into the habitat. The third option is Diggy Diggy, and that is, as it suggests, you would basically be able to dig into the earth, fill the gap with water, and then populate that gap. I don't know how I'm going to draw most, so there you go. Populate that gap with your aquatic species. And that way we could have that kind of, interaction between... There you go. Between land dinosaurs and our aquatic reptiles. Somehow that, they could go at each other or whatever. That seems a step too far for Evolution's terrain system to me. That would require quite a lot of redefining of the terrain system. So what about the behaviours? This is really the crux I want to get into. Rich mentions there's behaviours and challenges associated with keeping these aquatic marine reptiles. Now, what could that possibly look like? And I do think we'll have interaction between different aquatic species. I think the behaviours and stuff that Rich mentions, having the same behaviours in detail as the terrestrial dinosaurs, is very difficult if you don't have that interspecies interaction, basically. With me so far? Cool. So what could those behaviours be? We have hunting! So not only would our Mosasaurus be hunting, you'd have feeders, maybe manually placeable, maybe toggle options. I'd lean towards the latter. But, imagine this shark over here is a Ichthyosaurus. There you go, it's got a big old eye. Maybe it's as simple as if you have large marine reptiles, carnivorous ones, and small marine reptiles in the same aquarium, and those are the only delineations, then the large ones will hunt the small ones. If you've got two, maybe we've got a Tylosaurus in here as well or something, maybe they'll fight each other, maybe they'll hunt each other. I have no idea. I'm trying to keep myself grounded, because I've got no idea how complex this system is going to be, but a basic thing like hunting you would expect to make it into the game. If it's static in particular, feeding time! Why not if it's a static building, even if it's not a static building? I think the shark jumping moment is probably the most iconic moment for the Mosasaurus in the entirety of Jurassic World, so if they can find a way to integrate this into the game, that would be a very cool feature. Again, I can kind of see a world where these aviaries and these aquariums are slightly like the exhibits in Planet Zoo, where let's say each node basically has an option. So node 1 you can put in a shark feeder, or in node 1 you can put in something else, and you'd be able to choose enrichment items or feeding interactions or shows or whatever it is tied to each individual node, if that makes sense. Either way, this would be a very cool thing to include. What else? Attractions, if we're going to have these new custom systems, and they're going to have the same behaviours as suggested, well, in the dinosaurs, for the dinosaurs, we've got viewing areas, we've got viewing towers, we've got the gyrosphere, we've got the jeep tours and everything like that. will these ones just be like the aviaries were in Evolution 1, wherein you go and you plop down and you view it? That could still be very exciting, especially for the aquatics, but the introduction of attractions, maybe toggled in the same way as those feeding areas I mentioned in the last part, would be a very cool introduction as well. There's going to be a lot of walking with dinosaurs sea monsters from this point forward. Not many shows have actually tackled prehistoric aquatic reptiles, but this looks terrifying, I'm not gonna lie, but this would be very cool to have people able to go down in shark cages and be able to view the habitat from within those shark cages as well. That would be a very cool feature. Of course, there's other things we could do again, specific viewing areas and domes and stuff like that, towers. We could do glass tunnels under the exhibit. There's a lot of options when it comes to attractions. Maybe even a submarine tour. I don't know how custom this is going to go. How complex is this system? Instead of a Jeep tour, could we have a submarine tour? That would be incredible. But again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. If you have multiple of the same species and they're not, fighting in a species domination kind of way, will they herd? Will they have social interactions between themselves? How complicated are those behaviors going to be? It's a nice picture, this one. I like this one. But of course, the other side of that is dominance displays. I couldn't find a specific dominance display. Fairly obvious reasons, it's quite a hard thing to show, so here you go. There's one right there. He's displaying his dominance. The point is that if these creatures are going to be as detailed as their terrestrial counterparts, both in model and texture and everything, sure, but also in their behaviours, then all of these behaviours are very viable, and you'd imagine at least some of them are necessary. Hunting, feeding time, well, less so these two I would say, but hunting and herding and dominance and these typical behaviours that we'd see between members of both the same species and different species seems like a fairly integral part of making that happen. I am leaning more and more, I don't know why I'm becoming more confident, but I'm leaning more and more to this being a surprisingly complex system. I don't think we're going to be making exhibits with the same creativity we do make the land exhibits. I think that might be a push. But I am leaning towards multiple species within the same habitat, and those species have interaction with each other, and having to manage these like a real part of the game. They've already pushed this a little bit with the Mosasaurus appearing in the trailer. It's been mentioned, as I say, in interviews already several times. It would be a shame if it's kind of like a side part to the game rather than a fully featured integral thing you think about. The aviary was very cool in Evolution, but you stuck it down. You maybe looked at the Pteranodons every now and again if you wanted to, but it wasn't like an integral part of the game at any point. It wasn't like an important feature that you had to manage. It would be very cool if they were in the sequel, and I am leaning in that direction, as I say. A couple more things I want to very briefly cover, because I do prattle on a little bit too long sometimes, is the idea of aquatic and aviary creatures interacting with terrestrial dinosaurs, and indeed with human beings as well. Now, it's worth mentioning there are rumours out there, we're not going to name any names or anything like that, that this is actually going to be a thing. I'm not totally sure how it would work, but we have seen the Mosasaurus specifically interact with both terrestrial dinosaurs and indeed with aviary creatures as well. I think this one in particular might be a bit of a stretch, but let's think about that for a second. So how would an aquatic creature interact with a terrestrial dinosaur? Now, assuming it's not a diggy deep system, which if it was, that would make it a lot easier, I think the only way for this to happen is, let's say you've got your aquarium, maybe they're not above ground at all, maybe, so if this is your ground level, your aquarium is kind of built in like this, and your Spinosaurus breaks out. Your Spinosaurus is going for a wander, there he is. The Spinosaurus goes for a wander, and he wanders a little too close to the Mosasaurus pit, and the Mosasaurus, jumps out and noms on your Spinosaurus. Maybe even that is the equivalent of our aquatic species breaking out. The Mosasaurus can't break out, properly. Maybe it can, and it's able to, take the tunnel down to the ocean like in Jurassic World. In reality, it's not going to, beach itself on the land, it's not going to break out of here and then the water flood. That would be very cool if you could have, an above-ground aquarium, and it could bash through and it floods the entire park, and the Mosasaurus surges out into this water-flooded Jurassic World. But that is a pipe dream, to say the least. So maybe the equivalent of a breakout for our aquatic species, because it does say there's a challenge associated. Now, where's the challenge if it can't do damage, basically? So maybe the equivalent is their propensity to eat nearby things. If your Mosasaurus is kept very happy and safe and there's no problems, maybe it never does this interaction here. If your Mosasaurus is very annoyed, you've not been feeding it, or it's got the wrong environment, or God knows how that would work, or anything like that. Maybe the aquarium's not big enough, whatever. And then a dinosaur comes within range, maybe that then plays a set animation where the Mosasaurus could leap out and eat said dinosaur, or indeed humans walking past. This feels optimistic, but I know it has been suggested, and I do think there has to be some repercussions to mistreating your aviary and aquatic species. Otherwise, because challenge without punishment isn't really challenge, you know what I mean? The other thing then that I want to talk about very briefly at the end is what about semi-aquatic creatures. This has come up several times as well. I think this really only counts if Diggy Diggy is a thing. That is the official term, by the way. I want you all to use it going forward. I am very much of the belief that the aquatic system in this game is, as I say, going to be a closed loop of some description, as in it will be contained to your full aquatic creatures. I don't think the game is ready for amphibious creatures, for semi-aquatics, for creatures that are going to spend half their time in the water and stuff like that. That would be something I would be very pleasantly surprised by, but I think that might be a step too far at this point in time. I think what we're going to get will already be surprisingly complex, at least by what I was expecting, so this would be pushing the boat out a little bit too far. If not a Diggy Diggy system, but a item you can place in your habitats, that's like a let's do more drawing here. I am making all this up on the spot, by the way. So you've got your Spinosaurus habitat, and you've got your typical water, your sort of semi-shallow Jurassic World Evolution water that we've already seen. But what if there was a placeable item, like a feeder or like anything else, that was basically a pool or a pit? And you place it down, and it just puts a blob of deep water. You know, you could stagger it and make it look a lot nicer, but it places down a water item within your habitat, a pool or whatever. A pool, basically. Whatever you want to call it, and your Spinosaurus and your other semi-aquatic creatures could then interact with that item as an enrichment sort of item. That's really the only way I see this working, personally, but I'm open to alternate suggestions. Okay, I prattled on for far too long. This wasn't really the plan. I just apparently had a lot to say on this whole topic. It's a really exciting idea to me, and hopefully we'll find out very soon. You know, we're going to get more species profiles, species field guides. Maybe the Mosasaurus one isn't too far away. We'll have to wait and see. Either way, thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you lovely folks next time. If you enjoyed this video, please consider throwing me a like. If you're new to the channel, throw me a subscribe. All that YouTube malarkey. Thanks for joining me. Cheers much love as always. Bye-bye.
Reaching out.